Welcome to This Week in Showdown. This is the first episode of this for the year. Thought that I would do a weekly episode recapping many of the happenings going around baseball and how they relate to Showdown specifically. This being a very interesting year, thought an explanation would absolutely be helpful to everybody. So, going forward, I think the initial first thing that we should always talk about is what are the new things that are happening in the league? What are things that could be of interest here going into the news for the week? So the first thing is just coming out. This is Sunday night. I usually record it depending on how interested I am in Sunday Night Baseball, right during or after. So the Braves are in the middle of kicking the Mets' butt, so doing it during. And it just came out that Verlander earlier was reported he was out for the season. He came out and said that is not true, that he is not necessarily out, but he will be being evaluated to take at least 2 weeks off, which is going to be a large portion of this season here. So you're talking somebody who's perennially in the Cy Young race, big strikeouts, lots of innings, really a throwback pitcher. Maybe not going to be available this year. Going to be interesting to see if he is. He's probably going to have a pitch count when he comes back, so he's not going to have the big innings pitched. I have questions on whether or not he'll be effective even if he does come back, so looking like we'll probably not get the greatest Justin Verlander card in the world. Something to keep track of. 4 Marlins did have positive tests for COVID. I think this is going to be things that's going to happen the longer we play. Hopefully everybody's going to be all right with that. But what that means is there's going to be roster shufflings. People are going to be able to get their chance. They're going to get a couple at bats. And then the question becomes, what does that look like when we start acquiring statistics throughout the year? So that is going to be something to monitor as we go through, on top of the normal dinged up injuries. Are people going to play through those injuries more? What does that mean? And I wanted this episode to be one where we discuss, when making a set, how do these new rules, how do they apply going forward? And then at the end, we'll do our damage report, who had good weeks. Obviously, the numbers are going to be super skewed here, so I'm not even going to do the who's on pace for a 10. I'm not even going to do who's in pace for the top 10 in ERA. Some people haven't even had their first start. So that's something we can expect going forward. A little bit of a shorter episode. I don't have any co-hosts today. Hoping to have some people on who will have something to add to further conversation. But also try to put a couple cards in here so you guys can enjoy those. So, pitchers must face 3 batters or finish an inning. So this is going to be an interesting rule. I think those of us who've been watching baseball recently got frustrated with the fact that people had to have multiple changes. Didn't have to. Teams were finding it advantageous to have multiple switches, even as far as the Brewers starting someone to only throw to 1 batter and then switching out their starter entirely. It didn't make for a great viewing experience. What that does do in a strategy sense is it takes the true specialist, somebody who's just there to face a right-hander or a left-hander or give someone fits. That person doesn't really have a spot, because they're going to have to face at least 2 more batters, or they're only going to be used in situations where they could potentially record the last out. What that means in a showdown sense is, when I was making sets, I always shot to have 10 third of an inning pitched relievers. And what that allowed me to do was make 10 relievers who were going to be interesting just because they were a third of an innings pitch. You were going to get them at a very big discount. So the rules would be they could pitch to 1 batter, and then for every run they gave up or every additional out, they would tire as normal. So they would tire very quickly, but you could finish out innings. It was a way to not have to pitch relievers who had been tired, or if your starter got tired mid-inning because of giving up runs. They were a very useful point-saving tool there. I found that those 10 guys, so you're making 600 card set. The sets that I made, you were having 120 relievers. There's not really 120 relievers of interestingness in there. So there were 10 2-inning pitch guys, so that would make it interesting. And then you had 10 third of an inning pitch. And that took the stress off the normal set. You only needed 100 regular relievers, which there was still a lot of duplicates. You were still going to get a ton of. There was no shortage of, B plus relievers in the league with 100, but you did have these 20 extra relievers who were interesting. With this rule, it's going to be harder to find these third of an inning pitch guys whose stats legitimately justify it. And there's going to be stretches. I think we're going to be going a lot off of reputation and perception. And I know people get upset when the perception, when the stats don't line up to perception as well. That's always a frustration. If somebody feels like they're a third of an inning pitch guy, but their stats don't bear it out, it's always like, oh, why didn't he get a full inning pitch? And it's like, well, you got to do what's right for the set. You have to do what's right to make it interesting. You have to give managers interesting decisions. Those people who've played with third of innings pitch, vast majority of people come back with that they're interesting, they're good for the set. If you play single team, if you're playing this is the 2015 Toronto Blue Jays, if you're playing with them, you're at a slight disadvantage, and that is an interesting thing to try to manage around. So that makes it very interesting. Also, we lose the chance for really extreme cards. The opportunity to get a Billy Wagner or the 5-1 to 18 for a third of an inning pitch for, say, 60 points. It's a very interesting opportunity. Or even a 6-1 to 18 for maybe 70 or 80 points, right? That's an option with a third of innings pitch because they're just not going to be able to be used for as long. That's very interesting. I think that's really going to play into what we see when we make the set. We're going to have to be really intentional. Be something on the lookout. We may have a watch list for third of an inning pitch guys. So who are players we think should be a third of an innings pitch. This is one of my favorite adaptations. This was something that I did that I was very proud of. I thought it made the game better. It felt natural. It felt true to baseball. This rule is very artificial. I suppose all rules are artificial, but this one feels very artificial. But it definitely helps the viewing experience for me, which I enjoy, and I think we can work around it when we create the 2020 set. So the other new rules, there's going to be expanded rosters. I don't have all the dates memorized, but basically it's going to be 30 people at one point, then 28, and then 26. So teams are going to be able to carry one additional player as normal. I don't know if the double-header rule still applies where they got the extra player. But this is going to mean a few things. I think there's going to be fewer starting pitcher inning pitch because teams that are carrying 30 pitchers, I assume 2 to 3 of them are going to be extra relief pitchers, if not a spot starter. So you're just not going to be required to send your pitchers out for as long. You're just going to have more arms, more fresh arms. So I doubt that we're going to see the high innings pitched there, which was already inning pitch for starters was already starting to creep down. So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch. More competition for the 10th, 11th, and 12th batter. So the sets that I was making, and we're going to have somebody on in the later weeks to discuss whether or not we should be married to how teams should be constructed, whether there should be 20 players per team, whether we should go over, how do we handle the overages. But that 10th, 11th, and 12th spot's going to be interesting. See how those lineups work. I think for 60 games, you're going to see a lot of teams sprint through, especially with the DH. You can keep your good bats in there. So you're going to be able to put your good guys into DH. No reason why they can't play 58, 59, 60 games. But when we start looking at the 10th, 11th, 12th batters, what does that look like? Also, I'm seeing teams carry 3 catchers. So that's going to be quirky. You're already seeing teams being eaten up with 2. What happens with 3? Will teams just not have a second catcher because their second and third catcher both end up splitting enough at bats that it doesn't qualify either of them to be in the top 12? I think that's an interesting thing. On that front, I think the super subs here, I got Brock Holt here on the side. You have the opportunity to have players. And Brock Holt can't homer. I wanted to make sure I didn't cut off any of his useful chart there. Guy who's playing multiple positions, doing all sorts of things, giving guys a day off. Are there opportunities for people like that to have to have an opportunity to impact the game as much. Maybe a team will have one, maybe, but you don't need the National League equivalent. You don't need guys who are going to come in on a double switch, can play any position. After that, with the expanded roster, and you'll have guys who are natural position players. So, if you have the minor league third baseman, you don't need a guy who can play on the roster. You don't need a guy who can play second and third and short as much, because there'll be people who will just naturally fill in those spots. Teams will be able to carry a fourth and fifth and sixth outfielder. So those are gonna, I think, as we see guys who have just obscurely qualified for an additional position. You see this a lot for first base, or guy might qualify for corner outfield, because he just pinch hit and by National League rules. I think we're going to see fewer of that. So, and that also goes into with the fewer people qualifying because of the universal DH. So you'll see one more qualified DHs. I always put 10 in my sets. I don't know that this rule means we should have 20. I actually doubt that we should have 20. We're going to have fewer pinch hitters, and I think that fewer pinch hitters is also going to play into the position eligibility. I just don't think that there's 20 interesting DH cards, is my gut. But with a 60-game season, and I also don't know that there's 20 people who will be naturally considered as a DH. When you think of them and go, oh yeah, he was a DH. So I'm interested to see if that actually plays out. You see American League teams, what they'll do is if they don't have a positional DH, somebody who naturally fits that position, a David Ortiz type, that they will use as an opportunity to rotate a day off for their fielders, especially, their good fielders. So I think that will benefit the National League players. You'll see the counting stats go up because guys won't get true days off and then just have to pinch hit, but they will be able to play the whole game and just take the load off of defense. I am curious where we end up going with this one. I think the right number is probably going to be 15 DHs. I don't think the right number is going to be 20 DHs on the season. So something to monitor as we go forward. Now, moving forward to the damage report. First, guaranteed extra base hit on a chart. This is exciting. So no matter what, this is a factor of the shortened season. No matter what, we're going to see at least one player with an extra base hit on their chart, and that would be J.P. Crawford. Doesn't matter what on base he finishes with. He had 2 triples the other day, which means that a 20 on his chart, if he doesn't get on for the rest of the year, will be a double. Or if he just walks or hits no additional extra base hits, and that's because with the shortened season, everything being multiplied by 2.7. That's equal to 5.4 triples, more than enough to qualify for one on his own chart. So very exciting. Congratulations, JP Crawford. You are currently have the most impressive showdown chart. If everything were to stop right now and we didn't prorate anybody up. So, going on to the damage report here. I did cut off Nelson Cruz's homer, but you guys can deduce by looking at the chart over there that is a 17-20. This is his 2015 cards. All these cards were 2015, by the way. So we can post them up somewhere for you guys to find them. But Nelson Cruz with 3 home runs. He is just ageless wonder right now. So he is on pace for 162. Well, he's on pace for 60 home runs. So he'd give Babe Ruth a run for his money there. His prorated pace would be 162 homers. I am a little skeptical that he'd be able to hit that over a 162 game season. But if anyone could, it could be Nelly Cruz. So we have two. There are the 2 home run players. There's 16, so people are getting off to fast starts, which is good. That'd be a prorated pace of 108. So obviously people are going to cool down, but it's good seeing people hit home runs. Justin Turner getting off to a crazy double start. He's somebody who could finish with a crazy amount of doubles in a prorated season. The question is he going to hit the equivalent of 50 or 60 doubles, or is he going to get a lot of home runs? Remember, the triples that we use like a Clevin is going to be really powerful this year because each one's going to count as 2.7 of whatever they need. So a single triple can really change and give flexibility to their chart. Interesting options for other people who are doing some damage. Jose Iglesias, not really a power guy, but a guy who can get doubles and triples. So, and a good fielding shortstop with 3 doubles already. getting off to a fast start. So people getting off to a fast start could be very powerful. Somebody like Iglesias, he has an 8 speed A card in the past. Does he have the opportunity to get a 9 because he starts out and he just hits like 340 and he could never maintain that for a year. But with the short season, does he have an option there? Tony Pham, 4 stolen bases. Obviously, that would be a ton on his chart. I'm not sure that he's going to steal. He would steal Ricky Henderson like base numbers over a full season, but super interesting there. So this was just a sample of what I hope this Sunday report will be. I hope to have more people on to have a little back and forth, so it's not just me waxing poetically. Also, as the numbers start to come down to earth a little bit, it'll be interesting to see where exactly some of these guys finish as things start to come into focus and what we decide to do with the set. So this has been the Weekly Report. Tune in next week.